Hello, I'm Mike Dalton. Welcome to this emergency broadcast of the Chiesa La Vida podcast. Now, in wake of Game 3, where the Golden State Warriors beat the Cleveland Cavaliers 110 to 102, there's been a lot of excuses made for LeBron, a lot of people really upset about the outcome, and there's a lot of vitriol in this LeBron-Jordan debate. I'm just going to come out and say that I do think Jordan is the greatest player of all time. If you don't like that I think that, you should probably just stop listening now. Nothing I say is going to make you feel better or console you. I just noticed that as the debates between LeBron and Jordan grow and more vitriol, as LeBron racks up cumulative stats and participation awards, essentially, the debate just rages on. So, in any case, I'm just here to clear up some issues that I've seen, because people like to denigrate Jordan's competition during his era as if that should be held against him. Look, a lot of people like to call Jordan's era the golden age of the NBA, or quote unquote real basketball. How can you dock a guy for dominating against the competition? Today we can say, oh, well, they didn't shoot threes, or they didn't handle that much back then. But players today are so much better. They're much more athletic. Well, they don't have a fucking post game, and they don't play defense like they did in the mid to late 90s. Even went on, honestly, until the mid 2000s, honestly, that ISO ball. It truly died out when the Mavs swept the Lakers, Kobe's back-to-back championship Lakers, en route to their championship award, coincidentally enough, over LeBron's Heatles their first year. But you get the point. There's differences in the game. However, the main point of what I'm getting at is just destroying this argument that Jordan didn't play against anybody, all because LeBron's probably about to be 3-6 in the finals, and people just need a argument against Jordan's perfect record. LeBron's secure. LeBron is absolutely secure as a top 10 player. He's probably going to be a top 5 player by the time he's done. There's no need to defend this man this much. It's not often the best player in a sport is a Mount Rushmore athlete, but that's the case with Jordan, and it's likely that no one's going to eclipse him. And that's fine. That's okay. But ultimately what I'm getting at is the man absolutely did have competition. And we're going to start with this year, not this year, but his first championship team against the 1990-1991 Lakers. A lot of people like to claim that this Lakers team is old. And by the way, I'm just going off of what I know and Basketball Reference. I have a few tabs open to his competition that he played in the finals that year, their roster, and the overall NBA seasons, his last 2 or 3, because that's when the MVP narratives come into play. So 1990-1991 was arguably MJ's best year, as he scored 31.5 points on 53.9% field goal shooting. Absolutely ridiculous shooting efficiency, especially for a guard. He had to fall back on his playmaking and rebounding, and that's where the stats argument comes into play for the LeBron-Jordan thing. Because LeBron plays in his free-flowing system where he gets to do most of the work, rack up the stats, post up great numbers. Nothing wrong with that, but Jordan played in the triangle system. That's and he was the leader of that system. He got the last shots, or he was a part of the play that won the game. Like, he was involved in the last play. He was the leader, the alpha of his teams, undisputably. And he led them to 6 titles, straight perfection, no Game 7s. That argument isn't the be-all, end-all, the no Game 7s, but it does play a factor. So, with that being said, this was a 5-game series, and honestly, it could have been a sweep. People like to say this Lakers team was old. Magic was 31. He was second in MVP voting that year, behind Jordan. So you could argue this Lakers team was on their last legs from their 80s dynasty, but they weren't old. True, they had no Kareem, but I mean, when you look at the players Jordan had, you realize this team was really top heavy. It was him as the star player, Pippen playing second fiddle. I mean, this was a traditional 2 superstar team. Horace Grant didn't get an all-star selection until Jordan left the Bulls. He wasn't as highly regarded until he went to the Magic, honestly, a few years later. They replaced him with Dennis Rodman. I'm getting ahead of myself, though. This 90-91 Bulls team started and ended with Jordan. That Lakers Showtime team was on its last legs, yes, but it started and ended with Magic. And frankly, the Bulls almost fucking swept them. The only reason they didn't was because Jordan's shot rimmed out in Game 1. Take that for what you will. Moving on. The 91-92 Portland Trail Blazers. Now, I'm going to go ahead and pull up what Jordan's team did in 91-92. I did not go ahead and pull that one up because I know the Bulls were at the peak of their first three-peat team, and that was probably Jordan at his best, some would argue. His physical peak. He famously had the 6 threes in one half against Clyde Drexler, who was also second in MVP voting that year, and the media really tried to hype up that one. You can just go ahead and look up some promo packages for that season for the Blazers and just see the way they talk about Clyde Drexler. See, now Clyde Drexler isn't regarded as highly as he is because he had to go to Houston to get a ring under Hakeem during the Rockets' second championship ring during MJ's retirement in the early to mid-90s. But in any case, he was highly regarded that season. He was a prolific scorer. I mean, let me just pull up what he did in 91-92. 25 points a game, 47% from the field, 33, almost 34% from 3 in an era where they did not regard threes that highly. Shot 79% from the free throw line, 6.6, almost 7 rebounds, 6.7, almost 7 assists. The Blazers that year, I mean, he was a lesser Jordan, to be honest. The Blazers finished 57-25. The Bulls were 67-15. Jordan was just flat out better. No questions about it. The media tried everything they could to make things seem fair. Kind of what they do now with LeBron, except, you know, this is going on decades now of no one really being able to compare to LeBron. And this was the golden age of basketball, right? Jordan just frankly crushed his competition on a traditional two superstar team. People want to denigrate Kobe's first three rings because he was second fiddle to Shaq, but people want to talk up how great Pippen was, but he was clearly second banana to MJ. Where's the consistency in that? Let's take a look at the rest of what that 91 Blazers squad had on their team. We're just going to go by minutes here. This was their rotation. Clyde Drexler, Terry Porter, Jerome Kersey, Buck Williams, Kevin Duckworth, Clifford Robertson, Danny Ainge, Mark Bryant, Ala Abdelnaby, I messed that name up, a young Robert Pack, and then Wayne Cooper rounded out the rotation. Ennis Watley got some minutes as well. But ultimately, this was a defensive-minded team. They were third out of 27 teams in defensive rating in an era that didn't really go by defensive ratings. We have that now. They didn't. Opponents' points per game, they were 12th out of 27. However, they were 6th out of 27th in pace, which is where you get that defensive rating. This was a well-coached team. They pretty much tried to copy the Bulls' success. They mixed up the results a little bit because the Bulls, quite frankly, didn't have a guard as good as Terry Porter. He averaged 18, 3 rebounds, and 6 assists. 5.8, but 6 assists, while shooting 46% from the field and 39.5% from 3. Once again, in an era that did not highly regard the 3. It was viewed as mostly a gimmick. Meanwhile, Terry Porter also played great defense. So, take that for what you will as well. And they beat him in 6. Bulls beat him in 6. Didn't matter. MJ was once again Finals MVP. So that takes us to the last year of the first three-peat against Charles Barkley's Suns. Now, people will argue now that Suns team wasn't that good. That's ridiculous. This Suns team beat that same that same Lakers team that went to the championship in 90-91. They beat that same team the next year in the first round without Charles Barkley. This was a 50-win team that needed one superstar to take them over the edge. They finally got that in a trade without losing much. They lost some picks, sacrificed the rest of their future, which is why they were so terrible until Jason Kidd, Steve Nash, Mike D'Antoni kind of saved their future in the early to mid 2000s, and that went on for a decade or so. But this was a good team. They just needed a superstar. They got that in Charles Barkley. He won MVP that season. Chuck was a phenomenal talent. Don't let anyone tell you that just because he didn't get a ring. He just happened to run into Michael Jordan at the peak of his career. This 92-93 Bulls team didn't win 60 games like the previous two teams had, but once they hit the playoffs, they went full throttle. This team kind of coasted. I believe they won 57, 58 games. I'm not even going to waste the time to look that up. I know they coasted during the season. That was the whole point of the story. That's why Charles Barkley won MVP, because his son's team finally broke the 60-win barrier, got 62-20. I mean, it's basic narrative. Once he got to the finals and MJ averaged over 40 on his ass, and he fucking told his kid that no other player had made him feel that way before. I mean, come on. What are we really fucking arguing about? This is the Bulls operating on all cylinders when it mattered the most. For comparison's sake, no shots at LeBron. Great player. He didn't win his first year in Miami. The third year, he overcame a very tough Spurs team who let him take open jump shots. I mean, he did hit the shot that they let him take. All props to him. He overcame his adversity. But everyone went in knowing that this Bulls team was the best in the world and that they finally had someone who was supposed to be at the top of their game when the Bulls may have been at their weakest point, and the result was the same, Jordan in 6. What is there to fucking argue about? So then we move on to the second three-peat. Of all the teams that Jordan played in the finals, this team could easily play today of all the other ones. You could argue for the Suns because Charles Barkley was a transcendent star, Dan Marley was a shooter, Kevin Johnson was a combo guard like today, and you'd have a point. However, Charles Barkley didn't shoot enough threes. This team had shooters. Shawn Kemp was the modern-day Blake Griffin. He was better, though. He could play defense, and he was a little more athletic. Couldn't handle the ball as well, but his post game was better. So, that team was essentially what the Clippers wanted to be. They just went to the finals, and Gary Payton, for as much as people want to talk about how great Chris Paul is, what about Gary Payton? I believe he was a 2-time Defensive Player of the Year. Let me pull that up real quick. Got the Supersonics. By the way, they finished 64-18. They were the second best team in the league that year. Only behind Jordan's 72-10 Bulls. So, also, the Supersonics were down 3-0 to the Bulls at one point before they switched Gary Payton primarily to Jordan, and then it went 3-2 before the Bulls finally won. This is the game where Steve Kerr gets all the credit for being the future superstar that he's brought up as, when really he was just a guy who could shoot threes in an era that relied primarily on everything but that. So he was a three-point specialist in an era where people didn't shoot threes. He wasn't even used that much. He wasn't a great ball handler. But in any case, this is where he gets brought up as the guy who saved MJ's ass. And to a certain extent, you're correct. He did save them from losing that game. He did hit the game-winning shot. However, they knew the double team was coming to Jordan. This is where punching Steve Kerr in the face came through later, because he told Jordan, when they come to double team you, I'll hit the shot. Is that not some form of leadership? That doesn't show up on the stat sheet, but that leads to the ring. Are we forgetting what Herm Edwards said? You play to win the game. So, Gary Payton, underrated player. I forgot to even look up if he was a 2-time Defensive Player of the Year winner. I know he got 1 for sure. Okay. He was only a 1-time Defensive Player of the Year winner. However, he was on the all-defensive team 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 times. All first teams, by the way. From 93 to 2001. During Jordan's second three-peat. Jordan at this time, by the way, changed his game to fit into more to what his team needed. In the past, he was more of a free-flowing guy. The triangle was built to accentuate his strengths even more and hide his weaknesses, which, to be honest, he really didn't have any, but he needed to hold back in certain areas so that he could score more and efficiently without taking as many shots or having to make as many or just do as much. That's what certain players have to do to win. You have to sacrifice numbers to get the chip. That is why John Paxson hit the shot against the Suns in Game 6 to win, because The play was whoever is open on the perimeter gets the shot. Jordan had the ball. He saw someone open, and he made the right play. That's something LeBron, I will admit, does not get credit enough for. But, I mean, LeBron also hasn't had to make that decision in a moment like that either. And then I already covered the Steve Kerr play. That was a design play in the huddle. Who comes out of the huddle without a play? If you do that, that's completely inexcusable no matter the era. You come out of the play with, oh, give me the ball. What? That's not what a professional basketball team concerned with winning a championship does. I'm sorry. I don't care who you are. Regardless, they beat that Supersonics team, and then they play the Jazz 2 years in a row. In that era, definitely the best team they played. Don't know if this Utah Jazz team could play today, but to argue that this team wasn't athletic enough, are you fucking kidding me? Karl Malone? His kids are athletes. It's in his genes. Karl Malone is one of the best athletes of the last 30 years. People want to talk about how big and strong LeBron is. Well, Karl Malone was bigger. He just didn't handle the ball because power forwards of his era were not expected to. He could in spurts, but we're talking about one of the most devastating role men in NBA history. And the only reason he didn't get 2 chips is because Jordan stood in his way 2 years in a row. I mean, skipping over the first year, you know what? No, let's not. That was the year Karl Malone won MVP, and you could make a case for it. Actually, you could make a case for it more so next year because I believe the Jazz had home court advantage that year. But in any case, Karl Malone won MVP, and Jordan had the flu game. They still won. That takes me to their last championship, which I was trying to get to before. All you really need to know about this series, other than the fact that Scottie Pippen was extremely limited due to a bad back, there's some games he didn't play that much, and there's some games that it's not going to show up in the box score because he played, 30 plus minutes, but you just got to go watch the tape and see his movement to know he was fairly limited, pretty injured in those playoffs. But all you really need to know is that with the game on the line and the Jazz up, Jordan hit a shot. On the other end on defense, read that they were going to go to Karl Malone in the post. He stole the ball, went down the court, crossed up Byron Russell, hit the game-winning shot. What else is there to really say? Yeah, I'm just going to add this little addendum to the end of the podcast to clear up some points I made. Earlier I said that that same Suns team, sans Charles Barkley, eliminated the Lakers the following year after their finals appearance. That was not true. However, they did eliminate the Lakers in the first round the previous year. So, really depends on how you want to view that. Either way, the Lakers were bounced in the first round 2 years, in the year preceding their championship appearance and the year succeeding their championship appearance. So take that for how you will. The point still stands that Phoenix Suns team was a 50-win team who was very good and just needed a superstar to take them over the edge. I just didn't want to be wrong on which year they eliminated the Lakers. And actually, the year after their championship appearance, the Lakers were eliminated in the first round by the Trailblazers, who went on to the finals and lost to the Bulls in 6. The other point that I wanted to make was relatively minor in comparison. It's where I said Blake Griffin had a better handle than Shawn Kemp, and that's kind of debatable because Shawn Kemp was known for grabbing a rebound and then running the entire length of the floor in the fast break and dunking on someone. My point is that Blake can actually handle in the half court, rack up some assists. That wasn't really Sean's game. He was more of a transition type of guy. He would run the break, and so however you want to look at that. Also, just to further expand upon the Lakers' age, I believe James Worthy was the same age as Jordan, and when the Lakers met the Bulls in the finals for Jordan's first ring. So that team was not old. But yeah, that pretty much wraps it up.